Hello there, everyone. We just thought we'd go live just before Ian jumps in. Apologies for the delay. As we explained in the text chat, it's obviously been a very heavy news week. It's usually nowhere near this heavy, and we've had extremely significant news yesterday and more news today, including, if you haven't seen it, John Carmack's statement on everything, which just went up. So while we wait for Ian to join in, I'll just run through what the news topics for today are going to be. It's great to see everyone in the chat as usual. So we'll start by talking about the Delta emulator launching on Apple Vision Pro. That's a huge significant moment. Apple has allowed emulators on iOS and an extension Vision Pro. We'll then talk about Quest 2's accessory prices being slashed by more than 50% just a month after the headset was cut to $200. So Quest 2's fire sale, essentially. We'll then talk about the two major undocumented features that arrived in the Quest V64 update. Strange that there would be major features not in the changelog that arrived, but there are two major features. We'll then talk about the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. We'll talk about those briefly because they aren't AR glasses yet, but they are obviously on the pathway to one day being Meta's AR glasses offering. But they got some pretty interesting features. Visual AI, where you can ask it about what you see, and first-person view sharing in video calls. One of the features Ian really likes of Vision Pro is that in FaceTime, you can share your first-person view. And I always said, hang on, the glasses should surely be able to do that in a much lower friction, lighter way. And that's something that has obviously now arrived. We'll then talk about the major news. Firstly, Meta announcing that it will get rid of App Lab and open up the store. Then we'll talk about Meta Horizon OS, the flagship news, the new name for the Quest system software that will come to third-party headsets from Asus, Lenovo, and more. Finally, we'll talk about Meta announcing that it's making a spatial app framework for Horizon OS and what that might mean for existing mobile apps coming over, and John Carmack's take on everything. So yeah, we have a pretty packed news day today. I'll just quickly check on Ian here. Yeah, he'll be joining in as soon as he can. So Mr. Mycelium asks a very interesting question in the comments. Quest emulator on Apple Vision Pro when? I don't think anytime soon. That sounds like a remarkably challenging engineering topic. There was a similar project, though, in the other direction that we reported on. And I think a lot of people actually missed out on seeing this because it happened before Vision Pro launched. But there was a developer, actually the same developer that has ported ALVR to Vision Pro, or let me correct myself, has done most of the post-port work to get ALVR on Vision Pro working really well so that you can use Apple Vision Pro to play Steam VR games through wireless streaming. That same developer, about 6 months beforehand, actually found a way to stream the Vision OS simulator to Quest Pro specifically because it has the eye tracking capabilities to actually do the gaze and pinch interaction system. So you can technically sort of run Vision OS on Quest Pro if you have a Mac that has the Vision OS simulator and that very hacky software. It is far from perfect, but technically possible. And if you look on eBay and Facebook Marketplace, you can find a Quest Pro for really cheap now, usually less than $500. So if you were a developer that really wanted to build Vision OS apps, but you simply cannot justify or afford in any way that $3,500 for the Vision Pro, you could put together a very hacky solution where you instead use the Vision OS simulator. So that's very interesting. Harry Underwood brings up a great point that he says he's surprised they didn't rename Quest browser as Horizon browser in that press release. I'll talk about this now since this is an extraordinary show where we've had the delay and Ian's not in yet. So I think that is going to be a mess. This is going to be a branding mess because if you think about it for more than a few seconds, it's a lot worse than that. Quest browser being renamed to Horizon browser seems like an absolute has to happen, right? But what about all the other things that are branded Quest, right? Does the MetaQuest Developer Hub have to be the Meta Horizon Developer Hub? Does Quest Link have to be renamed to Horizon Link? All of the different, does Quest Plus, the game subscription service, get renamed to Horizon Plus? And how confusing will that be, given that until now, until this big announcement, so many people have referred to Horizon as Meta's Horizon World social platform only. We're going to have to be a lot more careful about what we mean when we say Horizon now, because it's become a brand across so many different things. I think Ian is here with us. Are you here?
Hopefully I am. I am on a Quest Pro. You've made me resort to a Quest Pro, so we'll see how that handles today. Hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, big news week. I've announced the topics, so if you're ready, we can get straight into it.
Yeah, let's get to it. What's the first one we got up here? Give me a second to get settled here. I'm still this why I don't know why the battery is at 7%, but I do need to make that start going upward over the course of this. I see Guy in our comments. Quite a lot for us to do and look at and process right before we came in here. I will be checking my messages and tweets throughout the show just in case something unexpected pops up over there. Okay, I see my battery is at 8%, so we're going in the right direction here. And I feel settled now that I've got the right version of David Heaney's studio on this headset. Do I have face track? Oh, I do. It's been a long time since I've had that. Okay. Well, David, what do we got first?
So first, we're going to talk about that Delta emulator coming to Vision Pro, and you can take it away here because you've been the one that's done this. And unlike many people, you've actually done it legally. You're not pirating these games. You are doing the intended path to actually do emulation, and you've been really someone who's been repeatedly talking about the advantages of being able to bring these older consoles over to headsets. So tell us what you found in trying this out.
Yeah, I was trying to find the video over in our system because I only put it on the site. I didn't put it on YouTube because I didn't want to monetize it, since that is one of the sort of gray areas where even the community standards of YouTube kind of have problematic questions here. So I'm not alone in this area of wanting to collect games and systems from my childhood. I know it's a pretty crazy market out there. I was looking at the various options, and I've put together a little collection I would love to show our audience at some point of the history of handheld gaming, handheld computing. And it's such a big deal to me because in many ways the handhelds we had, Game Boys, even before then, have a lot in common with these standalone headsets we're wearing right now. And there's actually a little bit of lost history in my mind when it comes to the peer-to-peer functionality that was built into the first 15, 20 years of those handheld gaming systems. As soon as the internet came in very large numbers, it started getting, um, put into the game design started molding itself around the internet. Whereas in the very early days, you had things like Mario Kart cartridges that could share the game to nearby systems from a single cartridge without the internet being involved, I believe, or at least the full internet. Uh, Peer-to-peer ideas were a powerful idea. They were the earliest way we played games: split screen, LAN multiplayer, zero lag experiences where you're crushing your friend without the internet playing any role in that competition. Pretty big deal to have lost over the years when it comes to massively online games, twitchy shooters where you have to be the fastest, and your latency can matter in the most important matches as well as like the simplest matches. So I've wanted to see what it's like to have these games exist today, and it was I have put together a little collection of cartridges. I backed them up to my system. It's actually pretty fascinating if you go through this bit of history, right? The way cartridges save the game change over the years as well. And right, like if you go and want to back up a game, you're also saving the cartridge or the saving the game and saving a bit of history. I've had horror stories given to me on Twitter. Like one of the things I've got here and one of the ideas I'm trying to test out is people have Game Boy cameras, I believe, hooked up as their like webcams. Well, I've heard these horror stories of people putting the Game Boy camera back into their system many years later, looking at their photos.
I think we may have just lost Ian there, but yeah, it's a pretty huge moment to have emulation available on Apple's platforms now. It really was all of one of the huge advantages of owning an Android phone. I remember for a lot of people I spoke to was just that ability to load up emulators, and this is a huge moment for Apple. I wonder how Nintendo will respond to this. We know that Nintendo has been very harsh on any monetization for emulation in the past, so there are a lot of difficulties here around how exactly this will work. In the EU, this comes through AltStore, the alternative marketplace, where the EU has mandated that that's possible. So it's interesting to see what that'll look like for Vision Pro when Vision Pro comes to the EU, given that we haven't heard anything about whether Vision Pro will also be subject to this alternative marketplace when it does come to EU countries.
Am I back here, David?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
I don't have my tablet here, so I don't know what that means. I lost the ability. I came back muted at some point. I don't know when I lost it. It was a very big deal to be able to preserve cartridges that I've had for many years to make sure that I don't lose the records in them, the trips I went on. They're of sentimental value at the most, right? Like I know they're not valuable to anyone but me, but like it's meaningful to have those things backed up and ready to live again. And one of the like we've covered things like Beat Saber custom songs in the past. We've covered the mods that are bringing classic 3D games into VR. This is an extension of the same sort of like, how do we bring it into VR? And it's been absolutely fascinating to look at this journey from both directions. You can go get Nintendo Switch online right now and get a bunch of classic games and put it into, put your Switch on a dock and then take the HDMI feed out and cast it into your VR headset and grab your Joy-Cons or grab your Switch controller and play your classic games routed in this really strange way into your VR headset. Or you can use an emulator bought from open source repositories, and it works with Joy-Cons directly connected to the headset. It's, the gamers who are trying to keep their childhood alive, the nostalgic way I'm referring to all this stuff, are moving ahead of Nintendo when it comes to getting this stuff into VR headsets. And this is just the beginning when you think about the 3D mods that could be layered onto this stuff in just a few years' time.
Yeah, it's really exciting time for emulators coming to Apple. The one thing I just want to push back on that I always do is it's not just Joy-Cons, it's any gamepad at all that's compatible. You do seem to love your Joy-Cons, but you can get a $20 Bluetooth gamepad on Amazon that will do this too and will charge by USB-C and all that. I think what's really interesting about this being on Vision OS is that, of course, because of the sharing capabilities and those spatial personas that we've talked about so much in this show, you'll be able to sit side by side with a friend who could be on the other side of the world, and he's playing a emulator while you watch. What we really want to see eventually, of course, is multiplayer. You want to see an experience where, when do we have the experience that we can play split screen on a giant cinema screen from across the other side of the world, especially when it comes to things like arcade games, because this isn't just Game Boy. Obviously, Game Boy is the flagship emulator here, but this is also Nintendo 64, NES, SNES. You know, the dream is that you
Yeah.
can sit side by side one day and officially like buy all of these old games and see them and put them, you know, into a 3D VR version of the original console, and then play split screen from anywhere in the world in a living room that's styled to look like the 1980s or the 1990s, or a giant cinema or an arcade where you walk around and do this. That's going to take, as we talked about so many times before, massive changes in how companies like Nintendo see the licensing of their classic titles. And it's obviously not something that the Nintendo of today has any interest in doing. But it's a fascinating question to wonder, does the Nintendo of 5 years' time or 10 years' time think that that kind of thing is valuable? And what about Sega? Does Sega think that, you know, the massive IP that they're sitting on for their classic legacy games, that they don't have a modern console to play, do they be more aggressive in bringing this to headsets?
Yeah, so this is where really we're going to see people messing with really interesting ideas in the very near future. We've seen some of these ideas test out in various places, but like a imagine a Sonic course, and you actually have the whole Sonic course wrapping around you all the way in like 300 degrees or something. And you can see it because you're unbounded now by the monitor size. Like you can see Sonic make his whole journey without it flying by you. There's different ways to mess with camera view. Like you can also stylize it to make it 3D. And the thing that gets me confused about the architecture underlying these systems is some of the videos like I've shared with you, David, and I've tried to put out there in various ways, but like it's really hard to convey. But I watched last week's episode in the television app on Vision Pro. So the television app produces a 3D box of a television, and then you go into the web browser, pull up a video link you want to watch, and it plays it on this television box. But you choose what kind of TV box it appears inside, whether you want it to be stylized, like you said, in one of those decades. Well, I put right next to it a VCR that would take VHS tapes from the 90s and earlier. And it was just a 3D model, non-functional. And I also like had a game cartridge, an actual functional game cartridge sitting next to just a 3D model of a game cartridge. But we're not far off from it being possible to put an actual emulator object that sits in your space and route a certain kind of cable over to the display to connect these two things. You could potentially do it with the system to connect these two objects, but the one like the dream that I'm after is you described split screen, you described LAN, and one of the things that's so I wonder if we could get there, David, is if you don't need to do a high-powered 3D game, could you use the extra processing to split the screens from a single headset? So basically let the headset render both one screen over on a TV, a nearby casting TV, and the other flat screen for the player inside the headset, and you use two game pads connected to the single headset. So could you get split screen in that way off of a single device because you're using a game from 1996 as your basis?
Yeah, I think it's more likely to happen the other way around, where you would have another device doing that and then casting over to the headset. But I still think the key use case here is if you're in the same room already physically, then a headset isn't really much use, right? That's not something that right now is very appealing. Eyesight is pretty terrible on Vision Pro. It doesn't feel great to be sitting next to someone who's not in the headset. What the real magic of these headsets is the ability to do this at a long distance. And I think that's always going to be the focus here, right? Doing this in networking. And commenters have pointed out that there is a PC VR app that does this really, really well. And that's why I was kind of outside of the headset there for a second. I'm going to bring up a video of it, which is EmuVR. All we need is a standalone version of EmuVR. And that's something that I don't think that developer plans at any point, but it will happen eventually. Ideally, one day you get a fully legal one that you can then, purchase the ROMs in an easy interface. But, the key is here that you're in a headset and someone else is in a headset, not this kind of cross headset or cross device idea.
I disagree. I have to disagree that I do, like, you're right on both ends. Like, they're both going to be incredibly valuable, and I think they're both going to need to be enabled in the next gen here of media for this to really take off. Like, it's eye-opening to think of how many gigabytes of data Nintendo has transmitted through US mail and through stores, right? Do we really want 50 and 100 gigabyte games distributed to us and then updated every 2 weeks for the foreseeable future? There's something really beautiful about the way Nintendo plans its game releases over the course of 3, 5, maybe even longer years in tight development with a console life cycle, right? So they start building years ahead of time and then build it specifically for the hardware involved. And it again and again over the last 30 years, it's been pure magic to see that sync up happen. But one of the things Nintendo does is, like, they often reimagine stuff. They either reimagine or they re-release stuff for the last generation on new generation hardware. And as much as I understand that the economics of the internet make other modes of gameplay appealing, make other modes of distribution appealing, Nintendo is the one company that has, like, survived the test of time in distributing little cartridges packed with very...
I think you just lost connection there again. I'll address this point when he comes back. But what you can see here on screen is EmuVR, that PC VR app that we're talking about, that does pretty much deliver the dream. It delivers the thing that we're dreaming about eventually one day happening from an official source. And this is obviously a single developer's project that they have worked on for years and years. It's not something that they have, signaled any intention to bring to Vision Pro or Quest. But if you do have a PC, a gaming PC, and you've got, a link cable for your Quest, or you've got virtual desktop or Quest Link or Steam Link set up, this is something that you can try and set up. And, the key is that this itself doesn't handle all the emulation. This is something that you can kind of connect to existing PC emulators and set up. But one of the things that they have delivered here is NetPlay, the ability to, run these games in split screen, as you can see on screen, across a network with virtual avatars. Very, very simple avatars, as you can see, just a floating head and hands. But imagine how incredible it would be to one day have this as an official product from Nintendo and Sega and, maybe even Sony for PlayStation 1, and be able to play all of these classic titles just like you're back there, even if someone is across the other side of the planet. This would be the best way to hang out with any gamer, wouldn't it? It would be incredible. Yeah. Gamertag VR has got a very funny comment here that Ian's going to play EmuVR. He saw the footage and just thought, no, I got to go try this right now. Though I do believe he's tried that in the past. Mr. Mycelium saying Meta still hasn't fixed the Wi-Fi issues on the Quest Pro, huh? I think that's very true, yes. There is an issue with the Quest Pro where its controllers use Wi-Fi to connect. Unlike all of the other touch controllers, the touch controllers for all of these other headsets, be it Quest 3, Quest 2, Quest 1, they all connect by a essentially Bluetooth. It's actually slightly modified Bluetooth, but it's essentially Bluetooth. whereas the Quest Pro controllers have their own chipset on board, and so they connect via standard Wi-Fi, and that can actually create interference with the headset's Wi-Fi when it's connected to a router nearby. So that's could be what Ian's running into, and I'm sure he will get back here soon enough. James O'Loughlin's saying it's hard to buy another Meta product after Quest Pro. We'll talk about that at near the end of the show when we're talking about what might come from some other hardware providers, because that is a really, really good point. Having a look at some other comments here. Daniel Leeper saying that they have no interest in playing their Spectrum games again. Okay, yeah, not everyone's interested in playing legacy titles. That is a good point, but a lot of people are too.
All right, am I back?
Yeah, you should be back now. Yeah.
I just tried two different quests. Tried one Quest 3 and then another Quest 3, and then came back to the Quest Pro, which I think is resurfacing that Wi-Fi glitch that actually why I stopped using this headset in the first place. In addition to the fact that my left hand on the Touch Pro controller has been dead since last year because of the headset not pairing with that controller.
Yeah. Do you think we've said enough about emulators, or do you want to say anything else before we move on?
I'm curious to see how emulators arrive on the Quest ecosystem. Right, they're already there via Android. I guess I misused the term, the Horizon ecosystem. Right, they're there on the Android ecosystem in very large numbers. They've been there for many, many years. Obviously, right, like that's one of the first things you point out as a Google Android user is welcome to the club. Well, the Horizon ecosystem has exactly 0 emulators right now, right?
Yeah, you can sideload them. We've talked about it before, but if you're talking about the store itself, correct, it doesn't have any emulators, but the you can sideload them as we all know.
Yeah, so I think that's it for now. I think we're seeing the bones of this stuff being supported on Meta's new system being laid right now as well. It's just really kind of wild to be able to save these cartridges at the very same time I can play these cartridges on the very same systems we're talking about with the same controllers. It's pretty great. I would love to see the official support come. Nintendo, I do think there's huge potential for Nintendo to take the stage with Apple this summer and really make a statement about Apple and Nintendo teaming up. But we'll see if that comes to pass. It could be just my imagination.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that next news piece. I think some people are saying you have a lazy eye. You might want to make sure the headset's correctly on your head there. It might be slightly off. The Quest Pro's eye tracking is very sensitive to the headset's position. Vision Pro seems to be a lot more robust. It could be just because Vision Pro has 4 eye tracking cameras, 2 per eye, whereas Quest Pro only has 1 per eye. So that relies on that exact camera being at the right angle for everything to work out well there. James Howe is asking, have you spoken about the spatial framework yet? Nope, we have just finished our first topic. So we're now going on to our second topic. The spatial framework is one of our last topics. But yeah, our next thing we're going to talk about today is that Meta has slashed prices on the Quest 2's accessories. And this is really extreme price cutting here. So, for example, the official Elite strap is now just $25. It was originally $60. The carrying case is $20 and it was originally $60. The Elite strap with battery is now $45 and it was originally $120. And then you see price cuts on the Fit Pack and the Active Pack as well. And the reason we're talking about this is because it's more evidence that Quest 2 is essentially in the midst of a fire sale, right? What we are seeing a month ago, Meta cut the price of the headset to $200. The higher storage 256 gigabyte model has disappeared. It's gone. It's off the market. what we are clearly seeing here, and what we strongly believe, is that they're trying to get Quest 2 and its accessories all sold out, get rid of all that stock they've produced so that they can introduce a cheaper model of Quest 3 to directly replace it in the market. And that is rumored to be called Quest 3S or Quest 3 Lite, though we do not know the exact name. What we do know from reliable sourcing about that new headset is that it will use the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 chipset from Quest 3. So it will have the performance of Quest 3, but with the old Fresnel lenses of Quest 2. So it will have those old Fresnel lenses, but with the new chipset. And we think it's likely that it will support color pass-through and mixed reality. So what you get is a cheaper alternative to Quest 3 that sacrifices the lenses and perhaps display resolution, but gets you color mixed reality and XR2 Gen 2 performance at a cheaper price. So we believe the Quest 2 is being fire sealed out of here.
Yeah. Very hard, complicated story for us to always tell about whether we recommend a Quest 2 or not. Obviously, $200 when you start getting really, really low. I saw there was even indications that it was getting down below that in a few like very limited places. You almost can't say no, but that's, I think, been the story Meta has proven since at least Oculus Go, that, right, you can sell them. What you can't do is necessarily keep people using them. We hear them say again and again that retention is going up, but they're also a bit vague on that front about the markers for retention.
Yeah, and what they did say is that retention is going up on the new hardware. So this is that old hardware that doesn't have the advantages of Quest 3. It doesn't have the new performance. It doesn't have color pass-through. It's, twice as thick as a Quest 3. The Quest 2 was a great headset for its time, and it essentially was the first mainstream VR headset. We're not knocking on the Quest 2. It truly changed the industry. When you think of this industry, VR, there is before Quest 2 and after, and those are completely different markets. Before Quest 2, knowing someone that owned a VR headset was a rarity. And now, as I've said many times on the show before, I have encountered, barbers, Uber drivers, waiters, bartenders that randomly, when I say what I do, will tell me, "Oh yeah, I've got one of those Oculus headsets." And I said, "Which one?" And it's, "Oh, the white one with the, I can play Population One or Beat Saber on," or whatever they say. And just people that you would never have, random people in life now say they own a headset, and before I would almost never find someone say they own a VR headset. So Quest 2 changed the industry, the first mainstream VR headset, but it is now close to 4 years old. We don't recommend buying it anymore. The chipset is just not going to provide you with a compelling experience compared to what you can get from Quest 3. And so, yeah, it just seems to be the final days for this headset until Meta replaces it with something new.
Yeah, I think that's we're getting close to closing the book on Quest 2, right? Like we've done our due diligence in warning people about what you're getting into, right? Like you could get a thing that runs the vast majority of content that's available today on the Quest platform at the very same time that Meta is transitioning the entire ecosystem and a whole fleet of new devices to the Horizon ecosystem. And not necessarily everything is going to make the jump from this headset to future headsets. I think that feels like a shoe that still needs to drop. What exactly isn't going to come from Quest to Horizon? It's going to probably be most things, but there could be some holdouts, and whether the holdouts matter to people is going to be something we're going to have to follow up on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is the Quest 2 is very much so a marker of the previous era of meta strategy, and we're about to see a major change. So let's just go to that next topic and discuss the two undocumented features that arrived in version 64, because this is fascinating because, as I said in the article, You would generally expect that a major consumer electronics company, when they release a change log for the system software of your hardware that you paid hundreds of dollars for, it would list exactly what's changed, or at the very least, it would list all the major new features. But with Meta, no, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes Meta will just add a feature or remove a feature, and you won't actually know until you put on the headset and go and try it. So the headline feature here in V64, which shipped around a month ago, and we talked about its features at the time. The headline feature in the headline undocumented feature is furniture segmentation or detection. So it will now create a kind of rectangular cuboid bounding box around your main furniture elements, and that includes doors, windows, beds, tables, sofas, storage, which means cabinets and shelves, and screens, which means TVs and monitors. And these are labeled in the categories I just mentioned as well. These are not unlabeled. So if you go close to them during mixed reality room setup, you will see the name of the object. You'll see table here. You'll see screen here. You'll see storage there. You'll see, sofa or seat there, which is useful because developers can access those tags and they can do things. For example, they can look for the largest table in the room and put a game board on top of it for something like Demio, a tabletop game, or they can replace all of your windows with a view into a virtual world. We've seen apps do that before, like the Ocean Rift experience that lets you change your room into a mixed reality view into an aquarium, but you had to manually do that, right? You had to point your controllers and kind of paint the areas of your wall that you wanted to be windows because it didn't know where are your windows. If that developer used this feature, they could now just automatically, when you boot into that mode, your windows are now virtual windows. So there's a lot of possibilities for developers to do here. What this isn't, though, is the scene script research we've talked about on this show before, because this isn't creating like a very high precision 3D model or anything like that. It's not even using like multiple shapes to represent something. This is just a bounding box, as you can see clearly in this image. It shows you the area, the volume in which each piece of furniture exists, and that's useful into itself, but it's not a detailed description of your furniture. One really fascinating potential use case I think could be done for this is because this can detect TVs and screens, right? This could, if developers wanted to, solve the I just punched my $1,000 TV into nothingness problem, because you could use a pass-through cutout to show just your TV even when you're in any virtual experience, right? So Beat Saber could add a feature that shows your real TV in whatever virtual environment you're in, and that would make people a lot more comfortable using more of their room.
And take it one step further, right? Reskin that TV with some content from of your choosing, right? So you both know its location in your space, so you don't hit it, and maybe you've got a distraction off to the side with audio emanating from it believably.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. There's so much developers could do with this, because we're slowly starting to get from we're still in the very early days of mixed reality on these headsets, right? Quest 3, the first headset the first VR style headset that is standalone and widely available for consumers, that can do a 3D mesh of your room. But developers didn't really know at launch what is in that mesh, and now they're starting to get a little bit more information. And over time, you can imagine you're going to get more and more detailed description that developers can use to place content into your room. So yeah, George Jorgensen is saying that you can already do that. Only place the objects you want to see and then turn on objects visible in the settings. They actually removed that in V64. They removed the ability to do that. So that's going to have to be down to developers now. To be clear, this is only Quest 3, this furniture detection feature. Just like some of the other things we saw in V64, the actual announced features, like the improved pass-through, are only for Quest 3. Meta is definitely starting to get into the era where the vast majority of their focus in updates is on Quest 3. And that's one of, again, the reasons we think that people need to realize that the Quest 2 is not going to be supported forever and ever. I mean, yes, it will be supported for a long time and it'll work and there'll be new games coming out for it and all of that, but it's not going to be Meta's focus when it comes to pushing the technology forward.
I can't see any questions this week on my tablet. I don't have a tablet in front of me, so you're going to have to rely on the good graces of David over here to get your comment in front of me. Yeah, I think we can move on here. It's a pretty big deal for this to be in there as a feature, and it's going to seem absolutely ancient to suggest that there were headsets without this sort of functionality as the core of everything you do inside the headset.
Yeah, I'll just quickly briefly mention the other undocumented feature, and it's multimodal in home. This is just a picture of multimodal in general. It's not actually in home. Just means that you're in the home system, the home space of your Quest 3 or Quest Pro. You pick up a controller. Now your other hand is still tracked. So you can pick up a controller and use it like you would a TV remote, just having one controller in your hand, and your other controller will keep being tracked. It's something that Meta 2 months ago made available for developers to use on the store and App Lab, and it's now something that they have in their own home space as of V64. It's not something you'll see on Quest 2 because Quest 2 does not have the computational power to run controller tracking and hand tracking at the same time, but on the future headsets, yeah. Okay, so people are asking you to turn off eye tracking in your quick settings because apparently it is just nightmare fuel today.
Well, okay, that's
you can
a
turn
problem
off
here.
eye tracking without turning off face tracking.
Ooh, let's see. Hold on, I'm going to go to the menu. Okay, eye tracking is paused for this headset. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Eye tracking is paused for this headset. I went into the quick menu and it is red now. The little thing that says for eye tracking is red.
I feel like we tried
Quest
this in
Pro.
future. I feel like we tried this in the past. Sorry, and the same thing happened.
We warned Meta. Is this not a privacy issue? Like, am I? Why would did you do something wrong here, David, as a developer to violate Meta's privacy regimen?
No.
Because why would your software let me see my eyeballs? All right, hold on.
It seems to be a bug in the system. Yeah, I think that's a stupid setting anyway, right? Realistically, like if you have to give apps permission to use your eye tracking anyway. So it just seems like, why would you waste space in the quick settings to temporarily turn it off?
All right, you're back. So this is when I clicked off both of the things, natural expressions and eye tracking. Both of those are red now.
Right. So yeah, your face tracking is stopped now. So
okay. Let's you guys. I'm sorry. I prepared it for you, and we've also I don't know. How does bug submitting work to Meta? I don't. Someone from Meta needs to. Oh, is David doing it?
You can click on report. Well, I'm not going to do it. I'm just looking for where it is. You can click report problem in the quick settings, and you can tell them about that. But that is pretty funny.
I just reported problem. We're good. We're good, team.
Yeah, well, people are appreciating that your lazy eye is fixed. Yeah, like I said, the problem with the Quest Pro is it has one eye tracking camera per eye. It's just not enough. The other headsets like Apple Vision Pro that are more expensive, to be fair, yes, but the ones that are really focused on eye tracking, they have two per eye, and it seems to sort out a lot of these problems. But yeah, let's move on to talk about the Ray-Ban Meta glasses news, and we're not going to talk about this too much because it's not an AR glasses yet, but we do talk about this product line because Meta has strongly indicated that over time this is going to eventually become its AR glasses product line. So given that Meta is spending tens of billions on developing AR glasses, it's the public way that we can monitor the progression of that as an actual product line out there in public. So if you're somehow not familiar with what these glasses are, they're camera glasses that let you take pictures and videos from first person. You can also listen to music or podcasts or take phone calls on them because they have speakers and really good microphones, remarkably, surprisingly good microphones, way better than any Quest headset, strangely enough. So that's their main use case. In the US and Canada, they also have Meta AI, which is powered by Meta's Llama large language model series. So you can have a kind of question and answer conversation where you ask it general questions. It's a really good form factor for AI products, much better than the AI pin. You just put these on. And the great thing about them as a product is that they still work when they run out of battery, right? They're still sunglasses or glasses, depending on which lens you get. You can even get the transition lenses that are glasses indoors and sunglasses outdoors on a sunny day. People really seem to like these Meta Ray-Ban glasses. They're being really well received. Mark Zuckerberg said on a podcast over the weekend that they are actually selling them as fast as they can make them. This has been a real big hit for Meta. This product, it's one of their most, it sounds like it's their most successful hardware yet. At around $300, but let's talk about what's actually changed this week. So there are two headline features here. First is the visual AI. Look and Ask is what it was called when it was in beta for a few months there, where you can ask it questions about what you see. So you could identify a plant or animal. You could say, hey Meta, what is this plant, or what is this butterfly, or what is that tree? You could ask something about what you're cooking, like, hey Meta, am I putting, is this the right combination of ingredients? Or you could take everything out of your cupboard and say, hey Meta, given these ingredients, what kind of soup could I make, or something like that. You can ask it to suggest a caption for your photo. You could be like, what would be a good caption for Instagram? And what I think is a really, really practical use case, those are all kind of okay, but what's really, really interesting is you can get it to translate what you're looking at. So say you're on holiday, assuming that one day the Meta AI is available in that country, you could just look at a poster or a sign and say, hey Meta, what does that say? Translate it to English and get the answer. So this is now rolling out to everyone in the US and Canada. Really, really interesting feature. And the other major feature is video calling. Well, first person view sharing and video calling on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. If you're an American, you may not know that WhatsApp is the most popular messaging service in the world. It is hugely, hugely popular. iMessage seems to be a big thing in America. It's not really that big outside. What people use almost every country in the world you go to, if you've traveled, you'll know this, it's WhatsApp. So you're in a WhatsApp call, you will see a new button pop up if you've got the glasses connected that you tap on it, and then you now are sharing your first person view. So this is on your phone, you already started the call, you tap that, your first person view from your glasses is being sent now to the video call. That's on WhatsApp, that's on Messenger, and yeah, at any time you can just double tap the glasses to turn that off. And so yeah, this is a really, really interesting feature. As I said at the start before you joined, Ian, you love the ability to do this on Vision Pro on FaceTime, to share your first person view. And now this is obviously a much lower friction way to do this, and one you could do even out in public quite practically.
Yeah, it completely changes the interaction or the usefulness of the feature. And I'm still trying to figure out how I communicate about this. I guess I think of a thought experiment here. Imagining I live in New York now, and I'm imagining my kid wanting to go down to the corner store for a piece of candy, and he's got a few dollars in his pocket. He could hypothetically wear these glasses while live streaming what he's doing as he goes down to the corner, and I would be in my VR headset at home watching him do his journey down to the store and back live inside VR. If you take that a couple steps further to like what an actual one person might do, right? You are seeing the full journey from AR glasses outdoors and what you might use them for, inside to a VR headset and all the things you might do with it, from the Meta glasses to the Vision Pro, right? You've got a full computer or close to it inside of the Vision Pro that gives you access to all these things. The Meta system hypothetically does all the same things that the Vision Pro does, but it's tuned to be a game system. So you can't necessarily see this full journey just as easily over on the Meta ecosystem, but I'm sure they're going to enable this exact same thing where you could take the Meta glasses outside, do a live stream, put them down, and then put on your Quest, and then you're live streaming from inside your Quest in a continuous journey from outdoors to indoors. We're this close to that whole story making sense to a lot more people.
Yeah, it seems like bringing this to Quest is an obvious step eventually. I would say that for both of these features, right? Why don't we have Meta AI on Quest yet? It really seems like it would be a no-brainer given it's on the glasses to bring this over. So you're doing your general computing on Quest. You have your multiple web apps or Android apps eventually up, and then you can just ask the Meta AI for something. You can even ask it something about what you're seeing. Right? Say you're running into some sort of technical problem. On a common service, like say you're opening in Google Docs, and you can just say quickly, like, "Hey Meta, how do I XYZ in Google Docs?" And you get an answer right in your ear as you're doing it. There's so many obvious use cases for that. And as you say, this view sharing as well. Why can't you share your view over WhatsApp in Quest? There's a WhatsApp app for Quest. Why can't that be done yet? It seems, as you say, very obvious that they bring this stuff to Quest as well.
Yeah, and the moment that happens, right? Like I imagine that should be the next Connect demo, right? Like Zuckerberg should be having a crack team working on specifically. I want my Meta Ray-Ban glasses journey to continue straight into the Quest upon going home, and I want all of the content that I captured on the Ray-Ban journey inside the Quest when I get there. But like one of the examples, so over the weekend I went to a show at a conservatory, and with a lot of plants around me, a lot of people using a lot of cell phones around me, and they were all, sucking down the cell phone bandwidth, the power bandwidth to their phones. I had one bar on my phone, and then I kept taking videos with the Meta Ray-Ban glasses and saying, "Hey Meta, look at this and tell me what you see," and trying to get information about these flowers that are in front of me in this big building. And it failed again and again and again. And it failed in such a miserable way that I didn't even hear an audio response. I asked a question and it died in the air. I never got a response. And that's a devastating experience to have. And the example I used at the outset of this weird thought experiment of my kid going down to the store, right? Like that, you can't have connectivity problems to feel secure using things like this all the time. The AI pin, right, is another demonstration of connectivity problems when you've got this massive delay just to get the info from here to your pocket and back out to the cloud.
Yeah, it's certainly a huge problem with these current AI models. This huge problem that these are all running on cloud servers, so you need an active connection to do that. Eventually, what these companies want to do is to have these models run on device, right? Because not only does that remove that problem, it also is cheaper because it's your cost, it's your battery life cost, your energy cost, not theirs anymore. It's not their cost. That'll obviously happen a lot sooner on headsets than it will on glasses, given that the kind of processor that's actually on board in these glasses is the kind of thing you'd find in a smartwatch, right? It's not anywhere near the kind of full-fledged mobile chip you'd find in a Quest or the laptop tier chip you'd find in a Vision Pro. And I think one of the really nice things about Vision Pro is that it can do so much of Siri locally, and that you don't even have to say "Hey." You can just say Siri. Obviously, that's in a lot of Apple products now, but it's great to have it in Vision Pro. So Meta could probably bring some of the Meta AI stuff on device. A lot of people in the comments are pointing out that the real missed opportunity for these Ray-Ban Meta glasses is that they cannot record spatial video, which is really funny because there was a predecessor product to this that did a lot less. It didn't have any of this AI capability, and it couldn't live stream to Instagram. But what it could do the same basic, photos and videos with lower quality than this model, and it could do the phone calls and audio listening, like music and podcasts. And it did have two cameras, so it technically could have done spatial video, though it didn't. And what they did for this model is they thought there's no need to have these two cameras here. We'll just have a wider field of view lens. But that obviously came, that decision was probably made like a year or two before the product came out. And then we now come into this era where Apple's really pushing spatial video, right? 3D video, to be clear. It's not magic. It's just 3D video, just as Meta comes out with these glasses. So I really wonder if the next version will do 3D video, because that would be a really great integration, right? You imagine you're outdoors, you're on your day, something cool's happening, you record that 3D video, and then you come home and you put on your Quest or your Meta Horizon OS headset, as we'll talk about later, and you watch those 3D videos you've just recorded straight in the headset, no delay. That's the integration that really makes you want to go from one to the other.
Well, you're right, and I think that's we'll get into it later with the OS switch over here, where this we don't have, Apple isn't shipping their glasses yet, right? They don't have their own outdoor glasses product. We saw, I think, Mark Gurman indicating that as one of Meta's product, or one of Apple's products, following the car getting canceled. So I would imagine it makes sense for Apple to do kind of camera glasses. The thing the thing that I think is really interesting about holding a phone, is you send a signal to everyone that you're holding a device out for capture purposes. You don't necessarily do that with glasses. It's a little alarming to have a light, and people aren't used to the idea of there being this light on your headset or on your glasses to indicate you're capturing. But the reason, like, how does Meta catch up to 20 what 15 years of computer, what is the term here, computational photography progress inside Apple? So, like, I'm using a 14 Pro right now. They've got already one generation new, and I turn on the action cam to take a video of my kid playing sports at the soccer game. And I turn on action cam, and while I'm doing this panning of my phone, the handheld is stabilizing in real time everything that it sees. And it really isn't hard to imagine going one step further with that and doing, like, real time 3D captures of spaces, doing model captures. We've seen some of this stuff already, and when there's apps to try it, I tried the app you've kept recommending, and it wasn't quite there yet. I'll keep trying new versions, but, like, capturing scenes and capturing models has been tremendously terrible for a very long time. And even 3D, the spatial video is cool, but it's not the same as this, like, as this magic you can do with the computational photography in these systems. Like, I know Meta canceled a watch, to my understanding, that was supposed to have camera features in it, right? And they dropped the second camera from the second generation. It's like they're trying to catch up to Apple's photography abilities, but I don't know that they can actually do it.
I mean, I think Google was able to do it with Pixel, right? Google spun up Pixel in 2016, and not only did they catch up, there are many people who would still argue that the Pixel phones have better computational photography. It's something that, a lot of people would argue from the reviewers I've seen that Pixel does better in photos and iPhone does better in videos overall. And, you do see that same stabilization technology in the Ray-Ban glasses. You would you would shudder to see what a raw camera output would look like on these glasses from walking around. There is a significant amount of electronic stabilization going on there, which is remarkable because on something like an iPhone or a Pixel, you also have optical stabilization going on. Whereas, as far as I'm aware, on these Meta glasses, it is purely electronic computer vision stabilization. And Meta has been, a leader in computer vision, in image processing. They have actually had their own software level camera for a long time on Instagram, right? On many Android phones, when you capture on Instagram, they don't get the same computational photography pipeline that the native camera app does. So they've had to build that out themselves, and they have significant experience in image processing there. I don't think this is an unsurmountable task for a software first company like Meta that has some of the
Mm.
top image processing researchers in the world working for them.
Well, let's take it a step further, and I guess give me the space to get a little abstract with this. But when I'm wearing a Vision Pro, I've got the battery pack over here in my pocket, got a cord running up to the headset, and there's a problem I saw it joked about over on Twitter, where sometimes I put that headset on and I don't know if the headset is out of power, and I'm waiting for it to turn on. Sometimes it'll be sitting there on the table and I'll hear it make the on sound to indicate that it's on. However, if I know that the headset is on, if I know it's like in the if I know it's got power and I know it's been on recently, put the headset down there. If I pick that headset up and put it on my face, it's usually within a second maybe showing me my surrounding pass-through environment. there's a very, very quick handoff between me putting the headset on and showing me the world on the other side of that. Um, I prefaced all that by saying a lot of the time Vision Pro seems like it's taking a really long time to wake up. Where at the same, and then like that feels very similar to what happens on Quest. But I'm wondering over the next 5 years or so, is the fact that Apple is first here with separating this architecture so that this R1 chip uh, processes your reality for you and then presents that to you before layering in anything else you see, any applications, any multiplayer stuff. Over the next 3 5 years, does that start mattering more and more and more when you're doing some of this behavior that I'm talking about? You go outside, you come back inside, you put on the headset, and then you're waiting for a good 30 seconds for it to turn back on. Is that always going to be the case on meta headsets? Is there going to be a
Well, I don't
difference
think
here
it's the
between
case now.
ecosystems? Yeah.
I put on my Quest 3 and I'm in pass through in 3 to 5 seconds at most. I don't think that's a huge problem there. Like you're right to say that if you go from a cold boot, right, if you go from the headsets completely off to on, there is probably a slight advantage in Vision Pro there. But I think a lot of that's just the fact that it's more powerful. It's 7 times the price. They have a lot more BOM cost they can put in there. Um, I don't think it's not like the days of Windows versus Chromebooks or Mac where you would turn on your Windows computer and like 10 minutes later it was fully ready because it used a shitty mechanical hard drive or anything like that. I don't think that's real, but there definitely is a slight software advantage on Vision Pro. I just don't think it's going to be from a purely like startup performance barrier a huge thing. I would actually argue the overall friction is lower on Quest 3 because with my Vision Pro, I find that I have to kind of like, get the battery into position in the pocket. And as you say, it's really not obvious when the thing is actually turned on. You put it on your head and you see nothing, right? And then you go, oh, is this on? And then you press the side button and then you're like, is anything happening? And then like you keep mashing it. And then like 10 seconds later, you start seeing that Apple logo pop up. It seems
Yeah.
this could all just be first generation problems. I imagine it is, but it really annoys me about Vision Pro. And you did say that someone on Twitter was talking about this too, because it's a real problem. It's hard to know when the damn thing's on. And it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Like, technically, you're supposed to press the left button to turn it on, and it doesn't seem to work. A lot of the time, I find I have to actually just detach the battery and reattach it to get the thing to turn on.
That is my preferred way to turn the Vision Pro off and on. Can you put the camera on me real quick? So let me show. So like the battery, I can feel it's right about here on. I guess you see it's right here. You reach up there, you just turn it 90 degrees and then turn it back 90 degrees, and it literally feels like a Matrix. Like in the Matrix, Neo reaching behind to the stalk and yanking it out and putting it back into his head. Very, very similar feeling to turning on a Vision Pro and turning it back on.
Yeah, James Howe making a very funny comment here. Bring the LCD gray black back. I think that is one of the big issues here, in that when the screen on a Quest is starting up, because you see that LCD backlight, but on Vision Pro you just have that pure dark black. So when the system isn't presenting anything, it's just darkness. There's no way to tell whether it's on or off. The same way on an OLED TV, if you ever notice if there's a moment where a show fades to completely black, the entire screen is black, it doesn't look any different than when your TV is turned off. That's actually one of the kind of funny problems with OLED displays. Are we ready to move on from this topic? I think the last thing I'll just point out, because a lot of our commenters are asking about this and hinting at this, is that yes, it's expected that the next version of these glasses in 2025, next year, will have a HUD, a heads-up display, not a big one that goes over your whole field of view, but just a little one that gives you some contextual information. And I think that's what a lot of people are waiting for to buy these glasses. That would, if you look at what they've even been able to do here without any kind of display, there's technically a 1-bit display on this, right? There's a LED at the top corner, the top right corner, that you can see when the thing is recording, right? Or you'll see a little LED, not the outside one, but there's an inside one. So you could say that's technically a display. But what will come in the next version is this kind of HUD, and you might be able to get notifications on that. You can get some answers from the Meta AI assistant visually instead of having to get everything read out. That becomes a really, really big deal. You can think of that as like what a smartwatch does in terms of being like kind of mediator for your notifications, but with a lot bigger screen space and not having to look down at your wrist. People are also pointing out, let me see who was pointing this out, Shall Alaska, that the wristband is a bigger deal, that they may be able to ship the EMG wristband. We don't have time to talk about that today, but that is also something that they are potentially going to have. So seems to be a big hit in this product. I think Meta is going to really care about this because of the recent AI wave, and this is going to be a huge focus of their own hardware. And we'll talk at the end about maybe that's one of the reasons that they're bringing in some other companies when it comes to mixed reality hardware. But let's first, before we talk about the Meta Horizon news, we're really close there. Let's talk about the other massive news that dropped yesterday, which is arguably just as important, and that is that Meta has announced that they're going to kill AppLab. Not in the way you might assume, in that they're going to no longer care about indie devs, but the opposite. They're going to eventually kill AppLab and make the main store have the same level of openness that AppLab has today. So you could also say this in another way. It's that they're killing the main store and instead making AppLab the main store and bringing everything over to AppLab. That technically would be a more accurate way to say this. But to be crystal clear, before we talk about this is happening in two phases. Hello again, Ian. This is happening in two phases. Phase one is that they will make AppLab a tab of the store. So no longer will these apps be unlisted. They will be in a tab of the store that you can go through and browse. There are obviously websites that do this right now. There's a section of SideQuest that does this for you, but Meta is now going to have it on their own system. AppLab will no longer be hidden. That's phase one, and that's happening really soon, according to Meta. Phase two is going to happen further out in the future. Potentially, although this isn't confirmed, I think it's probably going to happen when Horizon OS officially launches on these other headsets, is that they will do this merge. AppLab and the store merged. All the AppLab apps get onto the store. There's no difference. There's no such thing as AppLab anymore. And the store is a more open store that has AppLab's policies, where as long as it passes certain technical requirements, it doesn't crash, it doesn't run at a low frame rate, it supports things like, as long as it works and it isn't terrible from a technical perspective, and as long as it doesn't break copyright law or have nudity or something like that, they're going to let it on the store. So the policy should be similar to the App Store on iOS or Google Play on Android phones, or as a commenter says here, like Steam. And so Geek Godin in the comments said, that's nice, but not in any way an open platform. Open would mean you can install anything, develop anything for it. The only true open platform is Windows. Different people seem to have very different definitions of open. I've seen a lot of people say the only true open is open source. So by that definition, Windows isn't even open. Only Linux would be the open platform there. But I think openness is a spectrum, right? There's not like something is open or closed. There are certain things that are just clearly closed, right? Like, iOS back in the day before Apple's was a lot more lax, you would definitively call it closed. And you could probably define iOS outside the EU today as very closed. But I think what this is clearly is going to be a lot more open, and whether the Quest platform can be described as open at all, or it will be called the Horizon platform, is a bigger question. But this is certainly a big moment for the store, which the store is going to be renamed the Horizon Store as well as part of the platform.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all these changes, where we're going to go with them. I appreciate you breaking this one down for us, right? I don't think I can go off on my tangents too much until we get to the other bit of news here. This feels like a move that brings the Quest Store in parity with Steam in a much more literal way, I guess, right? Like AppLab was Steam early access before, but it was very much cordoned off in its own secret discovery place, and that's now no longer the case, right? So let's get into that second bit of news here soon.
Yeah, the last thing I just want to say on this is that this is going to have a huge advantage and a huge disadvantage. the huge disadvantage is that what the good thing about the Quest store beforehand was that there was this quality bar, right? Where if you were a new person that came in and you didn't know anything about, what's good and what are the most popular apps, and you didn't, read something like UploadVR's best of lists. Quick plug there. Go to our best of section on our website and find our recommendations for that. You wouldn't really know. You would actually have a genuinely valid expectation that you download something that isn't shovelware. And that's a huge problem on the Google Play Store, on Apple's App Store, and on Steam, is that there are some amazing apps and games on those platforms, but they are interspersed with an absolute plethora of utter shovelware, stuff that developers are clearly just putting out there with the minimum effort to try and make a quick buck. And that means that the discoverability of the great content is harmed. If anything is there, you don't know what's great other than just by, having to manually go through and look at user reviews for everything and do that, which is obviously, Steam's approach there has been to try and do as much of this through the community as possible, to have this, curator system, to have reviews that include overall and most recent. And that works to an extent, but it is difficult to find the diamonds in the rough there. And that will be a loss for Meta's platform. That system, that console-like curation that is what you expect when you go on a PlayStation store, right? When you go in the PlayStation store in your PS5, there's not a bunch of random, one guy, asset store shovelware there. You have a genuinely good expectation that you purchase something from the PlayStation store, you put it in your PS5, and it's pretty good. That's not going to be the case anymore in Quest. It's going to look a lot more like Steam and those mobile app stores. And that's a bad thing for users in some ways. Now, the counterpoint here is that for developer freedom and for innovative new ideas that Meta's curators were too entrenched in their old ideas to understand could be huge, that's going to be a massive factor here, right? Innovative new developers will now be able to get a huge amount of exposure and reach that they would never have got before. Ones that would have to sit in App Lab and do all of the marketing and all of the reach themselves will now get to kind of launch out of the stable from the start. And if something is truly great, if some person who, is thinking outside the box and slaving away, working dozens of hours a week, on building something amazing, they put it out in the store, people find it, it can go viral. And that can mean the difference between Quest as a platform having high retention and low retention. Because look at Gorilla Tag, right? Gorilla Tag is the number one most played app on Quest of any kind, right? It's number one. It's always number one. If you look at those charts, it's sitting there at number one. It was not something that Meta originally thought would break out, right? It was stuck in App Lab, and it was only because of the success of App Lab, where even by just sharing out that URL, they got enough people playing it that Meta went, holy shit, people really, really like this. Let's get it on the store. Had that been able to start on the store at the start, it would have been able to start to be able to launch much wider at the start. And there are developers right now, and there have been developers in the past 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, who have had great ideas for Quest, but have just thought, nope, I am not dealing with this. I am not going to this App Lab unlisted section and wasting all the money on the investment and the time that I have to put into this, with the possibility that it never ever gets to the store because someone at Meta just doesn't like it. So huge advantages here, huge disadvantages, but this is probably the biggest single move to happen to Meta's content store ever, by far.
Yeah, a very big deal. I think, how do I frame this? That like I've been in. There's a lot of stuff that exists on the store in App Lab and in Quest, and it's going to my understanding, become Horizon Store content unless you email Meta and tell them otherwise. Is that the case?
Sorry, say again. What's the question?
That if you've got your stuff on App Lab or the Quest Store, it's going to become part of the the Horizon Store unless you email Meta and
Yeah.
ask and opt out,
Yeah,
basically.
unless you opt out, these all get merged into one store that adopts App Labs policies.
Mm. Yeah, it seems like what's frustrating, I think, for a lot of watchers of Meta, right? Like they wanted this years ago and they expected it years ago and they didn't get it, right? Like Meta chose to do something else for other business reasons, and people took it as like a philosophical snub of like openness rather than just Meta choosing what was best for it at the time. But still, you've got this situation where I put the question out on Twitter already, and I'm trying to find out through various sources the answer to this question. Right? Is Google and Meta are those two organizations really going to fork Android over this situation? Is all of the content that's in this ecosystem going to make the journey over to the new ecosystem? And the example in my mind is Job Simulator, right? Job Simulator exists on Quest as a controller only product. Vacation Simulator has both controllers and hand tracking. Job Simulator is from Alchemy Labs, over a Google-owned company. We understand that it seems Job Simulator is going to come over to Apple Vision Pro with hand tracking, or Job Simulator is going to come over to Vision Pro with hand tracking. What exactly is the path to Google re-releasing Job Simulator yet again? Do they go and release Job Simulator on Google Play and let the Quest Store version languish with no updates ever again? Does it become the legacy version that doesn't see the hand tracking features added to it because it only comes to Google Play? These are the types of things we're wondering about in the next year or so.
Yeah, it certainly seems like Google's going to want to leverage that asset, Alchemy Labs. It's a very clever acquisition by them a very long time ago that is only now starting to come to play. I mean, they acquired this company back in the Daydream era, and now Daydream is dead, and they're launching Android XR soon, and we'll talk about that. But let's just get straight into this discussion, this Horizon OS discussion that we've pretty much started already, because it is, absolutely fascinating and one of the biggest changes of Meta's strategy ever. And if you've somehow missed this, if you've somehow been living under a rock, Meta is renaming the Quest system software to Meta Horizon OS, and they're going to make it available to third-party headsets as well. So it will no longer just be for Quest headsets. It will also be on third-party headsets, starting with Asus and Lenovo, and likely, based on the partnership announcement earlier this year, LG as well. So this is going to be a huge change where Meta is hoping that they can be kind of the Windows of XR, where Apple will sell you the hardware that runs Apple's software, Vision headsets with Vision OS, and then Meta wants to be the other option. They want Horizon OS, their new name for the Quest software, to be what runs on all the other headsets. Of course, the huge problem is that Google wants that too. Google also wants that. And Google is working on their own version of Android for XR called Android XR, funny enough, that is going to be powering a Samsung headset that is coming in around a year's time. And Google will likely want to secure other hardware companies as well as just Samsung. It's being reported that Google has been trying to secure them, but this is going to be a kick in the teeth for Google, that Meta has not only secured Asus, which is one of the largest PC makers in the world. They're very good experience in shipping consumer electronic devices, but also Lenovo, which is the single biggest PC shipper in the world. And Lenovo was Google's partner for Daydream. The Lenovo Mirage Solo back in 2018 was Lenovo, and now Meta has secured that. And if it's accurate that LG will also be making a headset, then Meta has these three huge big hardware partners and their own Quest headsets, Whereas Google, so far, what has been confirmed has just Samsung, though I absolutely expect that Google will have more than just Samsung over time.
Well, if it's successful, that's the ultimate question here, right? Is this Blu-ray and HD DVD? Is this VHS versus Betamax? What is the analogy here of this coming fight? This situation as it goes over time.
Sometimes there's no perfect analogy for these situations, and you have to kind of do a speculative analogy. You have to imagine that there was another company trying to be what Windows was back in the late 90s. And yes, there were some, but there were none that were at the same scale, right? Imagine that there had been another major tech company there trying to, ship an OS for other people's PC hardware. I guess the closest analogy you can make in a modern era was maybe, Windows Phone and Android, where you did have these two alternatives where, Microsoft was providing it to some companies to have Windows Phone. But I think they were so late to actually releasing something compelling there that it was just far too late for them to ever catch up. Android and iOS had already been established as the two there. And, we are making an assumption that there only is room for one alternative to Apple, right? It's possible that there will be room for both Horizon OS and Android XR, but I don't think that. I don't think you think that. I don't think a lot of people think that, because you're going to run into this huge problem that your purchases are not going to transfer between these platforms, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, your purchases aren't going to transfer to these platforms. This is going. Is this the last subject for today? Do we have anything else after this?
Yeah, I mean, we'll discuss the spatial app framework and CarMax comments, but it's all within the same topic.
Yeah, so this is going to go full circle back to the emulation, and I think about the idea of a cartridge. A cartridge includes an entitlement for the game, right? It's like assumed that you get that when you buy the game, you get the license to play the game, as you see fit. And that's what Meta chose to do when it moved, like when it went and launched Meta accounts. It moved into, like it said, all we want is a place to hold your entitlements, the purchases you make on our ecosystem, and that's about it, right? Like that's its function, was to separate it from the Facebook account ecosystem. And this is the realization I've had as I've been trying to like get all of my classic media up and running. I have like Super Mario Brothers 3. I have the cartridge for the Game Boy Advance. It's about this big, just a couple megabyte file from back in the day. It might even be smaller than that, to make this entire beloved Mario Brothers game work on modern hardware. I can go get that same game up and running on Nintendo Switch online, and I can pay, I want to say it's 70 or 100. It's an absurd amount of money, and I did sign up for it, to have that same game on two Switches side by side, talking to each other over local play. And now we're playing two games together. We're playing the same game together exactly like it was on the console of the 90s, on two Switches, together, all synced up exactly as you would imagine it. Right? It is the dream that we've discussing on the emulation side of things. But the price, David, the reason I'm going into this is the price for that content, right? If you want to have two people go into a massive, big world, you're talking $150 to a $150 ticket for two $70 games plus tax, to get two people into a game of that magnitude with multiplayer. It doesn't exist. Like this type of distributing games of this depth to this many people doesn't we don't exist. All the gamers out there want to complain about games going from $60 to $70. But like, I'm of this radical mindset when I'm looking at all this hardware I have to enjoy Nintendo Switch Online, and going, what, when you add all this up, we're starting to talk about PC prices in order to have this kind of pristine multiplayer gaming experience on official hardware. What I'm going like where I'm going with this is do we need to break down our mindset of how gaming in VR should be priced? Is there a model where people are paying hundreds of dollars to host worlds for their friends and family that have lots of things inside of them? Uh, what does it look like? Or does it all resemble this idea where you buy one app at a time, uh, and just some of them stop working after a year? Like that's what I don't want to have happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you mean by some of them stop working after a year. I think these platforms are all going to have an app-based model where you buy one app at a time. The issue is just that if the next headset you want is from the other company, say you get an Android XR headset and then you want a Horizon OS headset, you're going to lose all those purchases. Or if you have a Horizon OS headset and you want an Android XR, so it is going to kind of be like, as you said, Blu-ray versus HD DVD, or VHS versus Betamax, or DVD versus Laserdisc, because you're making a real investment in these, right? In the same way that back then it was physical stuff, you bought a huge physical stuff. It's still money that you're putting in, whether it's delivered physically or digitally. And if you were sitting around there with a bunch of Betamax or Laserdisc or HD DVDs, eventually you're sitting there with a massive sunk cost, a wasted investment. And that's probably going to make a lot of people hesitate
And
before they choose which headset to jump into, because a lot of people will just say, I don't know who's going to win, Meta or Google, but I'm not going to jump in until I know, or at least I'm not going to start spending, $60 on Asgard's Wrath 2 and, $50 on Assassin's Creed or whatever it's priced now.
yeah, what I think it feels like Meta is auctioning off surface space inside of their ecosystem, kind of like the way you in the 1990s, early 2000s would go into the Windows Start menu and you would see 3 or 4 apps pre-installed there that you didn't want to have, that were just ready to go. Or you would see like a panel inside that screen that came pre-installed on the system. That was the worst. Like, if you went and bought a PC, that was the best case scenario in a lot of scenarios of like, it's just a couple little panels taking up your PC. But in a lot of scenarios, people would actually get that machine home and it would be chugging along uh, a fraction of its intended performance because of all that extra stuff pre-installed. Meta is making a very clear bet here that they care about the connections you make, the people that you meet in meta space, uh, and that you purchase your things through Meta's store. But they don't really seem to give a care as to the stuff you buy on 2D screens from anyone. And that's why I'm so focused on this. Is like, if Meta could accept input from 2D screens everywhere, I think they would. And just all they care about is that they own the worlds that you buy via VR.
Yeah, the spatial layer. It's a very interesting question to wonder, will these third-party manufacturers be able to load on their own pre-installed stuff? Will the Lenovo headset be able to pre-install some Lenovo XR software? Will Asus be able to have some sort of, ROG VR software? That's something we don't know at all. I would wager no. I think this is probably going to be Meta having full, complete stack control over the software. But that's an interesting question in itself. What we do know, as you're kind of alluding to here, is that Meta has offered Google that if they want to bring their Play Store of 2D Android apps to Horizon OS, that they will let them do that and let Google keep their 30% cut, their existing economic model of the 2D app sales. But they're very careful to say 2D, right? So Meta would be fine with you being able to have the Google Play Store in this OS, but only for 2D flat screen apps. What Google wants, obviously, is, yeah, Pascal the Devil pointed out in the comments, and Google said no a bunch. Google said no, because what Google wants is not to be the 2D section of an XR platform. They want to be their own XR platform. They want Android XR. They want the control, because at the end of the day, yes, 2D apps are very, very important now, but over time, what you're going to see is spatial apps are becoming more and more important, right? Even as 2D apps will evolve into spatial versions that, you makes use of your space and make use of hand tracking and other kind of advanced input. That's something that in the long term, if you really want to make the money in these platforms, you have to be the platform holder that gets to control that. And we have people in our comments pointing out, Google kind of, in a way, to many people, forfeited this when they decided to kill Daydream, because in 2018, Oculus launched Oculus Go. That's the start of the Oculus mobile platform that then became Quest, that now is becoming Horizon OS. And Google launched Daydream with Lenovo as the partner. And Meta put in the billions and billions and billions of dollars to make it what it is today, to grow that, to release new hardware, to get more content. And Google did what Google always does, saw that it didn't succeed after 1 year and killed it. And so there is a big question. Is it too late for Google? I don't think so. And I'll let you speak for a bit on maybe what your view is on this, but I will give a defense of Google here and what their strengths are and what Samsung and them might be able to do.
The question that I think is really interesting to hear from Carmack, and you saw it echoed by Palmer Luckey as well in public, is Meta too late in doing this? Is an active question to wonder about Meta, right? Those are two founding people in charge of the Oculus effort who have long departed the effort, looking at Meta doing this now, going, is it too little, too late? Like they're raising the question, I think, in those statements, and you can get into that in a minute. But I think it's a valid thing to wonder. How the hell can we entertain the idea that Android, like Zuckerberg, will burn Android to the ground in order to own this space because of the amount of money that he spent, and there's no negotiating with that place. Like, I know I've been in these meetings. Like I was at I remember being at the Orange County Register, a big metropolitan area newspaper, and the Google rep comes around to explain how to rank better on Google or how to pay for AdSense. And you got this sense of the Google employee, just, we're Google, we exist, we are the center of the universe, and you need to answer to our terms about reality, right? And I think Google still is in this sense of no, you know what, the world needs Google. And I think Meta has to turn around on them and say, no, we effing don't, basically. And that they're negotiating from these completely separate viewpoints of just how necessary we think these technologies are to the future. And you don't come to this argument with Zuckerberg unless you're willing to bet the entire farm against him.
Yeah, I think Google and Meta are going to fiercely compete in coming years to see which hardware companies they can each get, right? I don't think anything is too late yet. We are still, as I say on this show often, in the early days. I know that sounds hard for some people to believe when VR has been around for 10 years, but 10 years is nothing in the history of technology. To slightly paraphrase Dune 2, these plans are measured in decades, right? This is not something that is being measured in years. We're talking about shifts that are going to happen over coming decades. So today there are 30 million VR users. If you have the same convictions we do, then one day there's going to be hundreds of millions and then eventually billions of spatial computing, or XR, what you want to call them, users. We are in the very early days, and it's not too late, because there's simply the majority of people who will use these headsets in 2035 don't own a headset right now. So from that perspective, it's not too late. But we're getting into the kind of years where the foundations of all of this start to get built. And so, in defense of Google, what they do have is, Horizon OS is built on the Android open source project, which Google maintains and makes open source. Now, the kind of Android you find on an Android phone, like a Google Pixel, is AOSP plus a bunch of other stuff. Horizon OS is AOSP plus a bunch of other stuff. And what I think we will see when Google does deliver Android XR, which may be announced at I/O in May, maybe potentially, is a more competent and well thought out strategy from an operating system perspective that might have a lot of technical superiority because Meta has this so much baggage from the last 10 years that they haven't been able to think of what does this look like from the ground up. And what we've praised Vision OS for many, many times is that they've had enough time to look and see what's worked and what hasn't, and to think about the future and what these headsets can do now and what they will be able to do to build an OS from the ground up based on iPad OS for the long term. And Meta is still in many ways paying a hard price for its legacy issues. It's the legacy that it's been building up to today. That's a huge advantage for Meta in that they have this store full of content. They have these SDKs built out. They have this tracking tech, the mixed reality tech. It's all built out and it's improving every month. But they do also have all this baggage. So Google will be able to come with a fresh start with being the experts in Android that are currently shipping, Google Pixel products that use Android and have been working with companies like Samsung on Android for a very, very long time at huge scale, at hundreds of millions and billions of scale. They're also going to have that Google Play Store of 2D content, right? So if you're an Android user today, all of your existing purchases will transfer across. And if you use an Android phone, you're going to have this integration between, Chrome, your bookmarks and your passwords. Boom, they're in your Android XR headset. You'll have all the kind of integrations you see between Vision Pro and iPhone are going to be available there. And that's going to be something that is a hugely important thing when it comes to using Android XR. The other thing is that not all hardware partners are equal. I'm not putting down Asus and Lenovo. They make great stuff. Specifically, Lenovo, for example, makes a lot of really affordable laptops and phones and tablets that are able to punch well above their weight. But Meta's already doing that with their first-party Quest headsets. They're already providing the affordable headset. And as John Carmack pointed out in his post on X, because of that, these other companies like Lenovo are going to have to price higher. They're going to be building around more niche use cases. Mark Zuckerberg, for example, in his post said that he could imagine Horizon OS headsets that are a lightweight headset that pairs with your computer for productivity, a headset focused on immersive entertainment with OLED panels, another one optimized for gaming with support for peripherals and haptics, and another one that's designed for fitness with extra light and sweat wicking materials. But Samsung is a hardware company in a different league of their own, right? This is slightly subjective, but I often find that when it comes to Android phones, Google Pixel has the best software experience, and I'm a Google Pixel user, but I will easily admit that Samsung has the best hardware. Samsung is often pushing the phone hardware, even though I personally am not a fan of their software approach. You're going to see a potential match made in heaven here, where Samsung, arguably the best at making hardware, is paired with Google, who has all this experience in Android, the Google Play Store, and software. Now, that may not be enough to fight off Meta's lead, but I do think that a lot of people are underestimating what the company behind Android and arguably the best hardware maker, not software, but hardware maker in the world can do with a collaboration.
There are so many things to consider here that we can go in so many different directions, but this model indicates that Meta is leaving customer service up to their manufacturing partners. So Meta is going to take the customer service for the social online experience you have when you're actually interacting with others with your Meta account, but they're going to leave up to their partners whether you're happy with the system you brought home. And that is leaving up to like the developers or to the partners whether you have a good experience in some cases. So like that's if there's any kind of a mismatch, like we saw this happen with Windows Mixed Reality. I don't look back at those Windows Mixed Reality headsets with any fondness, right? Like I have maybe 4 or 5 of them that have been given to me, sent to me in various ways over the years, Windows Mixed Reality headsets, and I'd only kept maybe one of them. Like there's no, like the Vive matters, the Index matters, the Rift matters. the Windows mixed reality headset from its very debut felt like an also ran system with poor specs that were not perfectly optimized for like the best experience. And you need to have the best experience to enjoy VR.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem with them was A, they were all the same, right? It was a classic Microsoft solution where you have all of these different manufacturers, but the headsets are basically the freaking same, right? They're using the exact same displays, very, very similar lenses, the same controllers, the same tracking configuration, cameras. Nothing was really different except for the Samsung headset. And that comes back to what we're talking about, right? The Samsung Windows mixed reality headset was the only one that people really did like. And there are a lot of people who will say, I like the Samsung Odyssey because it had those high resolution OLED displays, the same displays that would be in Vive Pro afterwards and Oculus Quest. Samsung had those OLED displays with IPD adjustment, with speakers, all of that they had first in inside out tracking. So if you wanted to play Elite Dangerous, for example, when the Odyssey came out, it was the best headset for playing something like Elite Dangerous. It was giving you those OLED blacks with higher resolution than the Rift and Vive. But I completely agree with you. All the rest of the Windows mixed reality headsets were trash. But Samsung were the only
Yeah.
company that could use their hardware expertise. And that's relevant here because that's the company Google have picked. This isn't like Asus and Lenovo have their specialties, but they're not Samsung. Samsung is in a different league to their own. But when it comes to these Horizon OS headsets, I think we're not going to have that problem because again, Meta is handling the low end. These are going to be higher priced products designed around specific use cases. So you'll get one that's for fitness that sacrifices maybe battery life, and only you're only using it for like an hour anyway. Who's gonna you're gonna do a 2 hour cardio workout. Or maybe you might, but I don't think I would do a 2 hour cardio workout. That could be designed around this, and it would be less optimized for other use cases. You might have one like is being shown in this image where it's using high resolution OLED displays so that you can sit there and watch movies, and maybe you have a better audio experience as well. You might have one that's optimized for productivity, where you have a lighter headset that maybe has a battery puck instead of a built-in battery because you're sitting down anyway. And then of course you have this one that's meant to represent the Asus one that's optimized for gaming, where you might have better cooling. You might have an Elite strap built in to move the battery back there to give you a really, really long battery life. Maybe the gaming one has, a 3 or 4 or 5 hour battery, depending on if it's bulky, because gamers don't care if it's bulky. That's fine. I do think there's an opportunity here for these niche specialized headsets that tailor a use case. The problem is they have to be a lot better than Quest 3 at that use case to justify it. Otherwise, people are just going to get a Quest 3.
Oh, lots of thoughts to continue going on here. The one that's sort of sticking with me is whether people are going to really purchase everything again, and whether there's any ways around that. I'm going to point out that SideQuest has Google Ventures as a backer of what SideQuest does. And I mentioned this elsewhere, but there's a list of companies or efforts. There's the Flat to VR Studios group. There's SideQuest, Big Screen, and even I think if we've got Geekode and Virtual Desktop that's kind of affected by this, but the others are multiplayer experiences or platform plays. Virtual Desktop I wouldn't call a platform play, but they're all affected by the rules that get laid out in the next little bit by these companies. And with Google in particular, right? Like I've seen the skepticism from people out there that look at this announcement that was just made by Meta and actually feel like it's a little rushed, like the timing might be a little bad on it. And then, of course, we just had this giant comment from Carmack alluding to that. Well, all this to say, Google has some incredibly low-hanging fruit. They could pluck right off the tree, right in front of them, to blow the minds of a lot of Android users out of the box with a new headset with Samsung, right? You show off robust environmental understanding from your Google-powered AI system inside your camera. If you see automatic scene recognition of like your furniture and all the stuff around you, that's an instant win for Google. They have some of the best services in the world for some of this stuff. Google Lens, was purchased years ago and can do amazing things. So you take the environmental understanding, something that Apple and Meta have yet to really blow people's minds with. And then you start adding a few more things like, gosh, what if you had Google Earth right in the home space of your Android experience, right? And you could visit all of the Earth right there. You just zoom in on it, and they've got nice little blinders to make it comfortable after all these years, right? They did what Valve did back in the day in their own way. They did it in their awkward way, where some of it was on Steam and some of it was on Daydream. But like Google did some really incredible things, and then actually sailed some of it off into the like Tilt Brush is a foundational piece of a lot of pieces of software today because of the way Google killed that project. So kudos to them for killing it that way, right?
Yeah, they open sourced it.
All this to say, like, Google could still come out and show off Android XR and wow people with really simple showings of their software platform in any way, and they could continue to make this painful for Meta for a very long time.
Yeah, I think what I expect Google to do is make it a lot more focused around being a Vision Pro competitor than around being a Horizon OS competitor. And right now, the biggest weakness with Meta's platform is that it doesn't cater for those media watching and productivity use cases, right? You don't have a real Netflix app on Quest, right? There is a Netflix app, but it streams in 480p and it doesn't support downloads. You don't have, a Disney Plus app. You can do these things through the web browser, sure, but then you don't get offline downloads. You don't get, some of the support that you would get in a real native app. If Google can just come straight out of the launch and have all of this available, like Apple has been able to with Disney Plus as a major partner and Apple TV Plus, and Google has its own rental services. Through YouTube you can rent movies, and through Google TV. Then they have YouTube Music. They'll be able to bring all of these existing services across. That would be much more a Vision Pro competitor. The problem is, in that time, Meta is going to be racing to fill in those gaps, right? They are reportedly part of the LG partnership is to bring over the LG TV smart TV apps and bring them into Quest so that you do have all these things without extra effort needed from Netflix and Disney Plus. So as long as they support LG TVs, which they already do, they would also support Horizon OS, and all this would just be one giant platform. And if Meta can do that, then that's going to be a huge issue for Google. I think another problem for this, even more than just that it takes away hardware makers from Google, is that if someone else can do something similar to Samsung, it doesn't have to be right up to their quality, but if someone else can come out with a headset that has, say, eye tracking, really good environment sensors, high resolution OLED micro displays, then you get a lot of the advantages that you would have got in a parallel universe where Meta didn't do this out of Google's approach and Apple's approach, except it's still running Meta software. A really interesting question from Kevin Brook, which asks, will Meta license their hardware, lenses, controllers, tracking, etc.? As part of Horizon OS, these headsets all get the core technology, right? They get the tracking, the pass-through, the computer vision, all of that runs on Quest from a software perspective. They get, but the hardware question is really fascinating because we don't know. Will these headsets have like completely different lenses that are, provided by Chinese manufacturers? Or will Meta say, if anyone wants our Quest 3 lenses, you can go stick our Quest 3 lenses in? The controllers is also a really interesting question. I would presume that some of these headsets will not have controllers, right? Like at least not in the box, but you'll be able to probably buy Touch Plus controllers to pair at any time. But if a company does want to include controllers, do they get to just include the Touch Plus controllers for Meta straight in there, or do they make their own and conform to a standard? There are a lot of details in how this is actually going to play out that have clearly not been figured out yet. It's, again, with sensors, are they using the exact cameras that Meta uses in Quest 3 and sourcing that into these headsets, or do they have freedom here? What we do know is that they're going to use the same chipset, right? They have to use the XR2 Gen 2 or the XR2 Plus Gen 2 so that you have Quest 3 as a baseline of performance. But what's unclear is like, how much can they do? Can they add more RAM? Can they have way more storage? Probably, yeah. As long as it's above a baseline, and how does that affect some of these use cases?
Yeah, so let me give another hypothetical example, like a an idea I was just thinking of. That imagine that Google Earth floating in front of you, like I said, but imagine the star field surrounding you. You're in space, and you're surrounded by the darkness of space all around you, with an actual, little blinking lights out in the distance representing the stars. And you could have 3 to 4 people all join you in this exact spot, like you can on Vision Pro. You could have a head and hands floating right here, 4 people all with you, and the Earth is floating around you with, let's say, cloud cover is realistic, represented by all the layers of clouds. If this was the meta ecosystem and you had this Google Earth experience, and you've got a person in a Quest 3 that has an OLED display, or it doesn't, right? But let's say a version of the Quest ecosystem that has an OLED. Then you've got another person in another Quest that has a non-OLED display. The person in the OLED display headset looks around at the blackness of space and goes, "Wow, the night here." And the person with the LED display with the fake blacks looks around and goes, "It's okay, cool," right? What I'm getting at here is like these choices at a platform level of what display is your bare minimum play out in unexpected ways across the content and across your ecosystem. And that is the kind of ecosystem Meta has just chosen to pursue, one where different people on different hardware are going to feel differently as they interact. Now, the idea that you brought up with Google and Samsung is so interesting because they are like the leaders in OLED, right? Like you have a really hard time making an OLED display unless you're Samsung. And that's almost why that's one of the reasons it's so interesting that Apple chose that technology for its headset, right?
Yeah, well, it's so for traditional large size OLED panels of the kind you would have in a smartphone or a Fresnel lens headset, Samsung is the leader, but they haven't caught up when it comes to this new era of OLED micro displays, micro OLED, which are built with a completely different manufacturing technique onto silicon. But Samsung did acquire Imagine, and they are building out their own capability for that. But yeah, I think the thing that makes this different in terms of like a minimum quality bar is that in some ways, like with Google and Android, Pixel is this high quality experience, and then you have a lot of Android phone makers that make lower quality stuff. Yes, you have other ones that make same quality stuff like Samsung, but a huge number of the Android phones sold around the world globally are these like $300, $200, $100, and even cheaper in some countries phones. Like I saw a statistic that half of the phones sold in the Philippines are under $100, which sounds crazy, but that's true. But with Meta, they're doing it the other way around, where with Quest, they're doing the minimum quality bar, right? So Quest 3 and Quest 3 Lite or Quest 3S, they're already doing the minimum. And then these manufacturers are going up. So it's not that these are going to be stripped down headsets. These are going to be stripped up for certain use cases or just differently designed. So I think it's a really weird one where
let's
you
talk
actually
about
have
Xbox.
What do you say?
Xbox.
Yeah, so Xbox is not making a separate headset. That's just we haven't even talked about that, but this was very misleading in their announcement where it sounded like there's going to be an Xbox headset. What's actually happening here, as you can see in this image, is that there's going to be a special edition of Quest 3 that is basically, it's black and it's got an Xbox controller in the box. So like it's nothing crazy. It's just a special edition of Quest 3.
And I can I can get the 3D model of the Xbox fridge and put it right over there in the corner, and have the full Xbox experience, I suppose. The question we were asking is whether it will include touch controllers in the box, and we don't have that answer yet, right?
I think it's highly, highly likely, right? Like this is a special edition, a limited edition that's not going to be sold in many, many units. This isn't, a lot of people have put a lot of thought into this, but this is not something big. This is just in the same way that like you get a Minecraft edition of an Xbox console where it's, textured in Minecraft creeper texture, or the same way you get like a Call of Duty version of a PlayStation. That's all this is. It's an Xbox branded Quest 3 that's a cool homage to Xbox. It's a fun thing of their partnership. You get, I think a lot of people are going to find it really cool that there's going to be a black Quest 3, right? And you get this green interface to match the Xbox styling. But like, this is not, unlike the Asus and Lenovo headsets, those are new headsets. This is just an edition of Quest 3. I think we've lost Ian there. Yeah, in the meantime, visually, why this is supposed to be a basic mock-up of Lenovo's headset over here, this for work headset, and then this is supposed to be a basic mock-up of the Asus headset with obviously a conceptual haptic vest of some sort. But to be clear, none of these are like specific product renders. These are just general visualizations of what third-party Horizon OS headsets might look like, optimized around specific use cases. See if Ian's going to pop back in. Hello again.
Did we both get lost, or was that just me?
I think it was just you. I think it was just you.
Well, are we done with this? Do we move on to the next subject? Because we meandered around a lot on this particular issue.
I have to go really soon, but I think the last thing the last thing we'll talk about is just that spatial app framework announcement. This was a really interesting one, and it comes back to a lot of what we were just talking about, where Meta has announced, without any details as usual, because why would they actually give details about announcements, that they're building a spatial app framework. And the main purpose of this in the short term is so that developers of mobile apps on Android phones can bring those over to Quest more easily. And it sounds like the longer term goal of this is to allow people to make simple apps for Horizon OS. I said Quest before, I mean Horizon OS. Let me just briefly say before I move on to this, what a nightmare this rebranding is going to be, right? Because like beforehand you said, oh, this game is coming to Quest. Now you're going to have to say it's coming to Horizon, which sounds so confusing given that there already is a Horizon Worlds. We're going to have to change all of our lists eventually to the best Horizon games or Horizon OS games. It's going to be a nightmare. They're going to have to change Quest Plus to Horizon Plus. They're going to have to change, Quest Link to Horizon Link.
All they can do, they create the opening space, the first loading space that you get into. Is there a name for what that's called right now? Because it should be called Oculus, the Oculus Square. You should just load into Oculus Square in Horizon, and we can just be done with the history and reimagine Oculus as the square at the center of Horizon. And I hope I just made everyone just hurt. Everyone hurts, right? At this idea. I'm sorry, I made you hurt. But this is how Meta uses terminology to like mess with our brain, right? Like I think about metaverse, right? The whole term metaverse. All Meta cares about is that you have your entitlements inside of Meta accounts at this point, right? Like they've invested billions of dollars, and that's the biggest thing that they have to show for it is the things you bought on the Quest store, now Horizon store.
Previously the Oculus store, of course, when the Quest launched. It's the fact that they've done this twice, right? It was coming to Oculus Quest, and now it's coming, and then it was now Meta Quest, shortened to Quest for simplicity. This is the second freaking rebrand. From Oculus to Quest to Horizon.
I can smell blood in the water. I feel like a shark. I can smell what I'm seeing when I see tweets like John Carmack's essay there, and we're working on trying to get some of these stories, but I'm the trend that I'm feeling emerge now as at this turning of the tide is people asking whether Meta squandered its lead. Did Facebook and Meta squander its lead? And not a lot of there's a lot of people in the Meta Ambassador program who even asking that question might make you might affect you in some ways, right?
Yeah, I think this is a very big discussion for the last 5 minutes. So, but we did, we did cover that a little bit when it comes to whether Google can come in here. But yeah, sorry, that tangent was just about the naming. I don't think the naming matters hugely in the long term, but it is a pain in the ass. And I don't think, I wonder if Meta's actually realized how confusing this is going to be. Because I mean, like, think of all of the things that are currently called Quest that they painstakingly renamed from Oculus to Oculus browser, MetaQuest browser, all of that stuff that has to now be renamed. But let's not focus on that too much. Let's just quickly cover this last topic,
Her,
if you don't mind.
Fine. It's just for years here, Meta has used the term Horizon to describe unfinished products. And they've just honed the product more and more and more and pushed it more and more to the front of their entire offering. And now they've got a whole bunch of partners ready to take a name of a brand that nobody knows what they're actually getting right now. Is it the same system, or is it a bunch of change stuff? It's just okay. All right, you go ahead.
No, there's going to be a huge amount of confusion around that. It's going to be a nightmare in many ways. Again, though, I go back to the thing of this is still very early. We're still in the first couple of tens of millions of people. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. The last thing I just want to cover is the spatial app framework, because we just mentioned that it's one of its main focuses in the short term is to bring traditional apps over, and that's going to be what part of Meta's strategy to try and compete with Android XR is to get their own 2D apps on. Right? They've realized Google is not going to bring the Play Store. That's a no. Google has said no. So what's next? Let's try to make it easy for developers to bring over those 2D apps. I imagine part of that framework is going to be providing like a kind of stand-in for a lot of the Google Play services. Because you'll know if you sideload Android apps on Quest that what you can't do is sideload an Android app that uses Google Play services. And this is part of that extra stuff that Google's Android adds on top of AOSP, the Android open source project. That extra stuff includes Google Play services, which is a major component of how Google keeps people locked in to Google's Android, as in, Android with Google Play and Google services. Meta will have to provide a stand-in for that, which is going to be a huge part of it. Other parts of it will be similar to what Apple is doing. And I think in many ways, the longer term goal of this is to allow people to make simple Quest apps without a game engine, because it's a nightmare that you need a game engine to make a simple Hello World app, or even just a simple 2D interface or a couple of 2D interface and a few 3D models style app on a Quest. That shouldn't be needed. It isn't needed on Vision OS. One of the biggest advantages of developing for Vision OS is you can just use the Swift UI and Reality Kit framework to build apps in a very similar way than you do when you're building apps for iPhone and iPad. Meta needs to make it really easy for the current billion developers that can make mobile apps and web apps to also build spatial apps for Quest. That's going to be a hugely important thing as they open up the store, as they try to make this a more general computing program. And that seems to be what this new spatial app framework is about, though we have had no details whatsoever about what it actually will entail.
Yeah, the way I interpret it, or the idea that it creates for me that would be really interesting, is if you had really dynamic tools and objects to use in Horizon worlds that you couldn't get anywhere. So like the Oasis idea that there's a whole bunch of artifacts littered around the environment that are super powerful if you go and achieve them. It feels like that is the kind of framework you would need to have. Like, you could actually buy objects or tools that have impact on the world. That would be neat.
Yeah, so this is what comes back to this naming confusion. This isn't about Horizon Worlds. This is about Horizon OS. This is native apps they're talking about here.
I'm sorry, I used Worlds.
Apps. Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a huge problem here. You're going to see a lot of confusion. Like, it's not, none of this that we've talked about today has anything to do with Horizon Worlds, other than like tangentially. Horizon Worlds is going to be bundled with all these headsets, just like it is with Quest headsets. They're gonna try and get as many people into Horizon Worlds, but Horizon is clearly. I saw a very funny comment on Threads in response to a Meta executive who's like, "Horizon is our name for the social layer of spatial blah blah blah."
That was a weird. That was a
Horizon
weird one.
is a vibe. Horizon is a vibe. You know, it's a vibe. It's Meta's name for all of its first party software. You got Horizon Workrooms, Horizon Worlds, Horizon Home, now Horizon OS. It's not
I
gonna.
work. I work at Meta over the horizon, man. Yeah, we're on a project that's gonna be in the future, a couple of years, right? Yeah, man, that's the horizon. Let's vibe. Yeah, okay, I got it. I like that. That's I can vibe with that feeling. That those Horizon devs have. It's really funny to have, like, my first conversations with that team was with the former AltSpace people, right? So that was a team that, like, they tried to do it on their own. They got sucked up by Microsoft. Microsoft let them mess around for years and then killed them. And here's, like, some of that team here working at Meta on the same general idea, and just like the Silicon Valley jokes of the people being locked away on the rooftop doing nothing for years. You kind of get that vibe when you're talking about this project of that's just what is it? What device do I need to install in what way in order to experience this world? You said the Nope world. I need to talk about the Nope world. Like, not enough people saw how bad that Nope world was, David. You didn't experience it. I had to experience that.
I'm gonna have to jump off here. I'll let you do
Fine.
the outro. You can stay on if you want, and if you want to do a little bit.
No, you've got to hit the end of the stream over there in England. So I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us for this ridiculous trek through virtual reality that we've been on this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and week out. Please become a member on UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, everyone. Sorry again for the delays. This has been a very late show because of it. But yeah, thanks. We always want to make time to come in here and talk to you. We love discussing every part of the week's news, and we hope to see you again next week. Thanks again for bearing with us and joining us. And it is now quite late in the UK.
All right. See you guys. See you. And thank you, David.